You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey Jeepers, welcome to another episode of On the Trail with Kevin Scott. Kevin and Scott. I don't know, it's show 100. I'm allowed to make things wrong. Kevin said this is our
things wrong.
This is our centennial show, you said?
Well, yeah, it's 100th.
Yeah, it's 100. Yeah, so anyways, while that is being said in my mind as I'm trying to grasp with the idea of moving forward with the conversation, I am Scott, the slapstick parts guy. And sitting directly across from me is...
Yeah, and out of slapping reach, I'm Kevin, the that can be remedied. I am the engineer, the guy who typically reads the instructions, uses the correct tools, and follows them, and does remember my intro lines.
Hey, while we will share what works for us and what didn't, it's always up to you to do your research, read the instructions, and of course...
Please follow them.
Hey, at least I got that part right.
You did, and that's the important part.
Took me 100 episodes.
It took you 100 episodes. Folks, I'm still sitting here just absolutely stunned that almost exactly 4 years ago...
Yeah, to the day.
We released show one.
Yeah.
And boy, it's horrible to listen to right now. For me, that is. You may find it humorous to go, oh, hey, so that's what they sounded like in the beginning.
And as you progressively listen through each episode, you go, wow, they got progressively better and better and better and better, That's one of the things we get is, hey, I just checked out your show, and I just didn't listen to your first show. You guys the same people?
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
So at 100 shows.
Yeah.
That's pretty just blows my mind.
Yeah.
That and where you, our listeners, and our Patreons have driven us to in terms of the stats.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Let's see, iTunes, we're in the top 20 of all automotive, not just Jeep, automotive podcasts. And it just... that's not us. That's you guys listening to us that drives those numbers. So thank you very, very much. Mm-hmm. That is deeply appreciated. As we hit our 100th show, Scott, let's kind of go back and talk a little bit about what is On the Trail with Kevin and Scott and what were kind of our founding principles.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people have asked, hey, we've heard the stories about what you guys used to do, but, what really... What was the driving passion behind it, I guess you could say?
Well, I was going to say, let's start off with the basics.
Okay.
This is our listener show.
Yeah.
Our content is driven by emails, text messages, even cheesy memes from you, our listeners, and our Patreons. You guys ask questions, have ideas, make suggestions, and we take that and try and turn a show out of it.
Yeah.
We've always said, although we haven't repeated it probably in the last year, 18 months, this is your show, each and every listener.
Yeah.
And not really ours. I could go on at length about lots of totally useless, boring subjects.
Yeah, but no, I got to pump the brakes on that. Some of the subjects you do know that's inside that noggin of yours is some really interesting and really cool stuff, like, the stained glass stuff.
Yeah.
Different things you've done, and it's just like everyone says, hey, have you guys ever thought about doing this or that? I'm like, yeah, Kevin did it. Well, what about putting a V8 in your Jeep? Well, Kevin did it in someone else's Jeep.
Yeah, I didn't do it in mine because if you go back a couple of years to the show discussions on when I was making a decision about slightly altered, back then I was running the stock 4-liter, and it was, do I do a diesel conversion? I was looking very hard at Cummins was coming out with that repower system.
The 2.8.
The 2.8. Could I go with a V8 conversion? I actually got really, really, really close to a Hemi conversion.
Right.
Down to the point that I found out that the engine and transmission combo that I was looking at was the unreliable period in their manufacture. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not buying somebody else's troubles and putting it in my Jeep. I have enough troubles with my Jeep as it is.
Just being a Jeep.
And, ultimately the show will tell you that I came to the conclusion that for what I do with my Jeep, Simple Edelbrock head and some intake and exhaust modifications and a little bit of tweaking on some tuning.
Some alien spacecraft technology too.
Well, I don't know about that, but any TJ that can lift a tire off the ground making a left turn, that's got enough torque. I don't need enough to rev the engine and roll over on its back.
The Kevin edition, the NASCAR one. Left turn, wheel go up.
Well, it has something to do with suspension and engine and torque.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is like not every situation calls for a repower.
No,
You know?
it really doesn't. So, but anyway, Scott, you were carrying on that. Folks, we have tried to follow what you guys have asked us to follow. And if we're not doing it ourselves, we'll go find someone who does.
Yeah.
So, if you want to hear about repowers, well, we'll go out and find some folks that have done it and are willing to share their stories. We've talked a little bit about Red Scorpion Fabworks and the custom CJ7 with the 6-liter LS,
Also known as a Yeehaw.
It is definitely a Yeehaw Jeep. We've taken you stories about specialty powder coating.
Yeah.
Bonnie and Kenny and God's Jeep.
Yep.
That is still, and it is God's Jeep Take 2 now.
No, it's actually type 7.0.
Well, technically, yes. But since we've done it, it's
type 2.
I just saw the videos where they took it up to Hard Rock for some yeehaw moments, and we're having a great time with it. But we're also as much interested in the people who are out there with the 4 angry squirrels, who are just trying to, well, can I run 35s?
This is. I'm glad you brought this up because Kevin and I kind of freeform shows a lot, and yes, just like me forgetting the lighting kit, the best laid plans go when you don't want them to. But one of the things I talked to, and I actually, man, I'm so glad you brought this up because it's what I wanted to bring up.
Well, it's just our history. This is where we come from.
A person on a Facebook group said, hey, I got a 4-cylinder YJ, 180,000 miles, and it's puking oil out of the dipstick, and I have it's puking oil out of the air filter.
Right.
And I said, yep, been there, done that. And he's like, really? Well, what did you do? And I said, well, here's what I did. Because he's like, do I do a repower? What do I do? I said, hold on. What are the symptoms you have? Well, I want to do a diesel flush and all this kind of stuff. I said, okay, just do this. Clean up that elbow. The PCV elbow. Get yourself some nice, good oil. I'd suggest like 30 weight, a decent brand, and 2 cans of 8-cylinder engine restore.
Okay.
And he's like, what? And I said, change your oil and use 2 cans of 8-cylinder because you got blow by.
Yeah, you got a lot of blow by.
You pull that oil filter cap, it's going to go woo.
Yep.
Ask me how I know. And I refer this to as the YJ black lung disease, because again, air filter is just caked in oil.
Yep.
Well, sure enough, he poured 2 cans of oil, did 2 8-cylinder. He goes, well, it's still a little bit of blow by. I mean, there is still a lot of blow by, but I have a little more power.
Because it's sealing the rings a little bit better.
And he goes, I'm only killing half the mosquitoes I was when I was driving down the road.
I was going to say, you still got to be leaving a blue smoke trail behind you.
He was. But the idea is that I said, look, this may get you another 10,000 miles to save money for another vehicle or another engine. Well, what should I do? Should I do an inline 6 repower? If you're going to go through all that trouble, bud, just do a V8. So...
See, I understand that.
I threw another 4-cylinder in with the punch 30 over and the 488 gears.
And you need to look at how you're going to use a Jeep. This goes right back to our founding motto. Do your research, decide what you want to do to your Jeep.
Yeah.
And we did several shows on that topic about everybody's in love with the V8 swaps. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against them. I've done them. I've sorted out the wiring, which is a nightmare. But do you want it and do you need it?
Yeah.
Everybody I've talked to with a high-end V8 loves it, but they admit that the handling is radically different.
Yeah.
The torque steer is phenomenal. The chassis twist, most of them, I had to resort to a full-body cage. If you want to see a V8 build done really right, you look at God's Jeep. Because Kenny is a skilled mechanic and fabricator, and he took care of the torque problem by looking holistically at it. And the roll cage is actually also a body stiffener or frame stiffener, and so the chassis can take it. But you're also still in a short wheelbase vehicle.
Right.
Here's a little fun fact you can Google. But if you look at one of the most famous overpowered small vehicles out there, the Shelby Cobra.
Yeah.
It's an AC Cobra, originally designed with a 4-cylinder, upgraded to a straight 6. Then Carroll Shelby brought the AC body over to the U.S., built a tube chassis for it. Most people don't know it's basically built on 2 4-inch pieces of steel pipe, and
Yep.
everything's welded on it, with a 289. That's the model that went out and won all of the road course races.
Yeah.
The 429 side oiler powered Cobras had so much power that they were twisting the frames. They were okay on a drag strip, but if you actually got on the power coming out of a curve, you couldn't turn. It'd just drive it straight off the track.
Yeah.
So, you have to ask yourself, do I have the power I need? And too much power can be a problem. Now, I realize that may be sacrilegious to some folks,
Yeah.
but you have to realize that power does you no good if you can't plant it.
Right.
And if it doesn't plant and becomes unstable, then it's just a good way to hurt yourself. But I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, no, you're right, because again, we always talk about finding your weakest link, and that's one of the more comments I had, because I can hear everyone typing now going, Scott, you needed it, Dana 35 V8, no. That's why I kind of steered more towards, repower with the 4-cylinder. Again, the guy only drove the Jeep for fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't a daily driver. I'm like, within a 4-cylinder, as long as you're not going to go down the highway, he goes, no, I got a trailer for it. Well, then just redo the 4-cylinder.
You'll go a lot further while all your V8 friends are sitting there going, anybody got a jerry can with some fuel in it?
Well, and not only just that, you can still wheel with what you have and not worry about, like, everyone else is melting down, because another comment was made about how I guess now the JLs, I haven't done any research on this yet, so I'm going to, moving forward by next show, I'll have more research. I guess the JL now is coming out with the Dana 35 again.
I had not heard that.
It's a redone Dana 35. Again, I'm going to do my research on that. I'm just using this as a product point. But everyone's saying, it's terrible that the lowest price point Jeep comes out with terrible parts. Well, you just answered your own question.
Well, and here's what I'm going to say is they're probably very good parts if they're left the way the manufacturer put them in there.
Bingo lollipop.
We've had this discussion before. Everybody calls the Dana 35 the 35, and it's, you know what? If you keep the 29-inch tall tires that are only 10 inches wide on it, and you don't put a V8 on top of it, and you drive it to get somewhere and not to see if you can break something, it actually will do a really good job. On the other hand, if you're out there to try and do King of the Hammers, it's probably not the most suitable axle out there.
Not. Well, and that's we talked about that gentleman, the older gentleman with the flat defender.
Yep.
You know what I mean? 4-cylinder, just having the good old time.
That's the devil's crack, and just
that's guts. That's guts and skill.
Well, you can't really fall through. Well, I guess you could if you fell out of the Jeep, but
Still, it's guts to go, I'm going to do this, and skilled enough to go, okay. And that guy did everything I would love to do in a Jeep that was twice as old as me.
Of course, I just realized something, Scott.
What's that?
We just went through the first year of the podcast in about 10 minutes.
Well, and that's one of the things, because I guess it's like, again, I love freeform shows, because again, people ask again, like, where'd you
I'm going to put again on the quarter jar.
I know.
Just like,
Look, absolutely. Go ahead.
That's 50 cents you owe me now.
Yeah, really. That's the worst part. But one of the things that kind of came up at work the other day, and we were talking about vehicles. A young gentleman called up and wanted he had a 2JZE motor and needed a GFXE fuel pump that's 2 inches taller. He had a 94 SC400 with a super motor in it and I said, okay, but parts don't work that way. I know what I'm doing. You're an idiot. Yeah, and walked away. And one of the guys next to me goes, Scott, where did you learn to do all the stuff that you did? Because we are always talking about TJ, YJ. As much as you complain, you get alphabet souped. You just alphabet souped him, and you alphabet soup us. I'm like, that's a good point. And then it kind of dawned on me. Here's this person in this garage building what their dream is and making mistakes, So that got me thinking, where did I come from? What started me on my path to automotive knowledge? And I can remember I was like my fourth car by then, because I never changed oil in the ones before. But I wanted to do a lowering kit on my 85 Isuzu Pup. So I go out there and I asked friends, and I lowered the torsion bars with a Craftsman hand tool set I had. And, didn't put the one spring spacer back or keeper back in there, so it eventually started sacking down again. But I remember with a scissor jack. I told Kevin this story before this, and Kevin's skin's crawling, but I used a scissor jack to lift the entire vehicle up so I could get the lowering block underneath it to hand tools, no torque wrench, hand tools with a 7-inch long handle to torque my U-bolts back down on my rear end. So that's
so
what
if you ever saw the little Isuzu pup on one side of the road and the axle bouncing down the other side, it was Scott.
And the sad thing is my side of the financial department is sitting here, and she probably remembers that truck and goes, really? But one of the things is that, again, I learned by making mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's how I rolled up my sleeves, and I made a lot of mistakes, and that's how I learned.
I can't argue with that. I mean, I made my fair share. I mean, I can still remember being 10 years old, helping my dad put in one of those lovely little three-dial gauge sets
Right.
on a 1968 Pontiac Firebird.
Don't tell me you left the engine oil. It was a mechanical and left the engine oil thing kind of loose and sprayed engine oil inside.
I was supposedly tightening up the fasteners to the amp gauge.
Right.
Now, that's not the volter gauge that is used now, but amperage, which meant you took the battery lead into the gauge and then out from there to not to the engine, but all the other devices.
Right.
And as I'm tightening, I did not realize that the battery was still connected. And wrench on nut turning contacts floor with the assembly back. And needless to say, I attempted to arc weld the gauge to the floor pan. Managed to knock it off. My dad's shouting at me to get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. And I grabbed a tool and I grabbed a wooden handled hammer and used the handle to knock the wrench loose.
Right.
And we looked at it, and there was no hole through the floor. There was probably an extra dimple of metal that shouldn't have been there, and the crescent wrench was no longer a crescent, but more of a L. But overall, no damage done. And, I still remember my dad sitting down and doing a postmortem with me and what went wrong and why did it go wrong. And he wasn't blaming. He just said, This is the way an engineer deals with these situations. And basically, and I know you're going to have to beep this out, but S happens.
I don't have to beat that out. That's okay.
S happens, so you got to learn to deal with it. And so that was not my first experience with a vehicle, but that was kind of my initiation by fire. The same thing when you give a young boy the shotgun to shoot for the first time. Yeah. And you're standing there ready to pick him up off the ground because he's got
that
all
shoulder's gonna hurt.
And you can teach and you can teach and you can teach, but until you bust your knuckles, get knocked flat on your back a time or two, hopefully it's not a Murphy's Law situation, and that's why I stress you should learn from others' mistakes. I still remember the most graphic situation was actually a TV show. It was made up. There was an old TV show in the 70s called Emergency.
I remember that.
You remember that one?
I remember that.
The two paramedics.
Yep.
There was a situation that they went in on where a guy had been working on a car on a jack, and the jack had collapsed, and their response was getting him out. He was alive until they took the weight off of him. And the release of the pressure allowed the story was, all the blood vessels that had been ruptured or broken and things were compressed. It's kind of like, when you accidentally tear a hose and you put your thumb over the hole. As long as you keep pressure.
Yeah.
And, long story short, of course, they saved you and all that stuff like that. But I can still remember going and asking my parents, was that a real situation? Because it seemed a rather far-fetched to me, and my dad was absolute. And my father at that time, retired 26-year veteran of the Air Force, mechanics, was a maintenance squadron commander working then for a steel company, one of the major steel companies. Says, yeah, it's very real and more serious than you think. And I think that was one of those that kind of a young psyche got me in that, okay, you can work fast, you can work safe, but you know what? If you really think it through first, you can work fast safely. And that's why I push it so much. And of course, my whole career ended up that way. And as far as Jeeps, you talked about you started with an Isuzu Pup. I started with, oh, good Lord, tractors and old IH pickup trucks.
International Harvester, for those who are wondering.
Corn binder.
Yeah.
As a nickname of them. But yes, one of my neighbors had one of those. We had Chevy C10 pickup that my dad kept popping the motor on. He was convinced
You
that the
told me about
C10,
that.
yeah. And I got to the point I could swap out a small block Chevy in that truck in about 3 hours flat, solo.
Yeah, it's like doing the Volkswagen motor. There's 3 wires and 4
bolts.
bolts.
And knowing the right way to hold your mouth when you scooched it forward so it would clear the apron pan
Yeah,
and drop down.
It's funny you talked about like taking the battery off when you learning by mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
See, sometimes mistakes you got to make twice. Like when we did the clutch and slightly altered, we in a big hurry raised it up.
Not
went to
slightly
go do-
altered.
Or sorry,
That's an automatic.
quantum
Quantum entanglement.
Got done. Get ready to take the starter off. We forgot to pull the starter, the battery.
Yeah.
So of course on a ladder, we're taking the battery off. I'm helping a friend with his truck the other day, and get in a hurry, lift up the truck. Okay, we found the crankshaft position sensor is behind the starter.
Got to take the
The
starter off.
truck's on the lift, and it's like, oh, great,
Great.
get a ladder.
Well, it's it's kind of an interesting thing. So, I guess the point here, folks, is that Scott and I came by a lot of this with the hard knocks and the bruises, and I've got lots of little decorative scars on the hands.
Oh yeah, like the first time I did my YJ transmission took me 16 hours. The second time I did it took me 13. The fourth time I did it took me 8.
Well, I actually my dad and I learned to do mechanics together. He actually was trained as an officer to lead mechanics, but when he retired back in 1968, long before you were conceived and concerned and thought in your father's eye and worry in your mother's mind.
Moving on.
Yes, but he started working on things, and there were 4 of us, but he kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, "You might as well learn to do something useful." And so, actually, it started before that. We had an old Pontiac Le Mans, the 2-door sports version, when we were living down in Albany, Georgia.
Yeah.
And learned how to do oil changes on that and overhaul an engine in the backyard kind of concept. And I was a young kid working on grandma's car, which was a 54 Chevy.
Yeah.
Tri-5, 54, 55. I'm sorry, it's 54, right before the 5, 6, and 7s.
Right.
But it was a neat old car. There wasn't much that could go wrong with it, And, I started turning wrenches young. And when my dad retired and we moved up to Pennsylvania, and he worked for Pittsburgh, Des Moines for years, and then decided to buy the farm out in western Washington County as his retirement home, he and my mom. And he brought me home a present one day with an ulterior motive.
Really?
And he said, I looked out and I was like, "I thought you were going to go buy a tractor." And he said, "I did." "Well, is it being delivered?" He said, "No, it's in the back of the truck. Some assembly required." It was a 56 Farmall Cub, which is a flat fender, a flat head 4-cylinder gas powered tractor.
So your dad got it from IKEA?
No,
A
but
flat pack tractor.
that would have come with instructions. This was just literally 2 wicker baskets full of parts. The front bolster, the transmission, the rear drives.
Where's bolt pack 4A? Where is bolt pack 4A?
Yeah, no, this was. And I remember him going off, and I said, "So you got a manual with it?" And he's like, "No."
No, it's an automatic.
No, there was definitely a manual's manual.
Okay, right foot pedal onto this, left foot pedal onto that, center foot pedal onto what?
Yeah, that's right. It's 3 pedals, And he's like, "Look, it's pretty straightforward. We ought to be able to figure it out." He said, "I'm taking the engine block in and having it machined to try and, I think the thing had maybe 15 horsepower." Trying to get
Dad, it's easier and cheaper to get a horse.
It probably was. No, I had a great time with my dad. We basically laid it out, and we figured out how it went together by laying the big parts that we knew. Okay, the rear tires are at the rear. And
That's a big one, right?
Yeah, and the little ones is the front tire, so we're going to put them up front, and that's a radiator, so that's going up front. And,
That's what we knew, right?
and that's the kind of stuff we knew, and we started filling in between,
Right.
And this one was had a center section with a hydraulic motor in it that, so it had a built-in hydraulic ram. So it's like, okay, now it wasn't hosed and everything. It was all inside the case, and you just had these arms that came out that had 90-degree cranks on the side that would lift implements with a rod going to the back for the 3-point hitch. And it was wild. But on the other hand, there's something about taking a stack of pieces and setting your butt on a stool, or actually in my case, it was an old trash can upside down, and going, okay, I don't know where this goes. Let's go look for this bolt pattern in some other piece and see if we can match up bolt patterns. And then once you matched up bolt patterns, you couldn't just grab any bolt and run it down. You had to grab a bolt, run it in. Did it bottom out? No. Okay, how thick's what I'm bolting?
Yeah.
So you did a piece by piece by piece, and it took us probably 2 or 3 months of tweaking. But the first time that we fired that thing off, although I will back a little bit, that was also my introduction to magnetos.
Oh.
And for those of you that know what a magneto is, which is a ignition system that requires no coil. It's got its coil, its trigger, its points, everything's internal. It's used on aircraft engines because it's high reliability and provides a wicked butt-busting spark. There you go. You don't have to, delete that
thank you.
one. Without any electrical battery source at all, including it quite powerful enough to jump out of the cap and come around to whatever is holding it.
Screwdriver you're holding next to it?
No, well, it was me holding the unit, turning the crank at the end, and with my dad going, "You shouldn't oughta." He didn't get any further.
What did we learn?
Electricity hurts. I mean, it bit me and bit me bad.
It's kind of like, the guy I was helping unplugging this 3-phase plug.
Yeah. And my dad looked over. He says, "Well, at least we know the magneto works."
Meanwhile, you got like the young Einstein hairdo going on. It's all smoking, and you're going, meep, meep. Yeah, meep, meep, meep.
Pretty close. But, it's still really neat to pull the starter ring on that thing and have it roar to life. And the little flathead four-cylinder engine has its own unique little brrrr.
Did you have an inertia ring on the flywheel?
No.
No? Okay.
Inertia ring? You just had a massive round chunk of cast iron. The outer edge had teeth in it for the starter, and the rest of it was probably 26 pounds of cast iron.
It's little things I throw out like that, when I talk about jobber pricing, and the people around me go, "How long have you been doing this?"
Yeah.
Inertia ring? Come on, Scott. It ain't the 50s anymore.
Yeah. No, this was predating that kind of stuff. This was brute force engineering.
Yeah.
Combined with, if you're not sure if it's strong enough, make it thicker or bigger or heavier.
Yeah.
And when I left home, well, in fact, when my parents sold the farm and decided to move to sunny Florida for retirement, take 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it was,
spend your money.
Exactly. So, it went with the farm, and it was still running, still pushing snow in the winter, still pulling a single bottom plow or a cultivator or, whatever he wanted, and it was a strong little engine. It made me really, and that probably was the foundation of my respect for any displacement engine. If you're strong enough to do what it needs, a big old V8. I've actually seen people that have converted not a Cub, but a Farmall A, by putting a flathead V8 in it. And
really,
it really didn't work any better. The original 4-cylinder, that was in the A model still,
chugs
right along. So, and then of course you can get the H's and the Super A. I'll go into that for hours. I love old farm equipment. But for me, the Jeep bug bit me bad.
Yeah.
About time I was due to graduate from high school, about 76, the bicentennial year.
Right.
Red, white, and blue everything, including the Jeeps.
Yeah.
They had the red, white, and blue Freedom Edition with
denim
the
interiors,
denim interiors and the Levi buttons on the seats. I wanted one so bad, so very, very bad.
Yeah, and you got one, right?
No, I didn't.
What did you get instead there, Kevin?
Ford Falcon. 1970 and a half. It was the last year before the Falcon became the Torino, the body style change. But it did. The fun thing about the Falcon, before we leave that, is when I got the vehicle from my dad, it was a 300 straight six C3 automatic transmission, 4-door Ford Falcon.
Right.
When I left my last time to go to college for my last year, and my dad said, "Hey, before you go, can you help me move this stuff out of your bedroom?" And he was going to sell the car for me. When he sold that car, it was still a blue 4-door with a Boss 302, a Muncie 4-speed, a 9-inch rear end, and no air conditioning, no power steering, just an alternator, and was quite capable of blowing doors off of just about anything, because unlike everybody else at that time who was jacking up, doing the bigger near slicks, shall we call them, the DOT legal slicks on the back and the skinnies up front and the drag style,
Right.
I was an early adopter of the NASCAR. The car had been set, balanced, lowered a slight bit in the front, raised a little in the rear, 70 series all the way around, no fancy rims, and sway bars cannibalized off of Mustangs up front, and I forget what it was in the rear, something else in the junkyard. Excuse me. And
Bringing nostalgia back.
yeah, it would corner like it was on rails, and it would beep and get.
Well, that's the cool that we talk about, like our past and all that. And speaking of past, like you talk about your Ford Falcon, is that, like we know Ford brought back the Bronco, obviously.
Yep.
And again, a big contender for the Jeep. But that is not, and everyone, I got a diatribe because it's on my notes. And again, I'm glad you did this because, one, I can do a joke, and two, everything else. Ford missed a golden opportunity.
Oh, Lord.
They should have brought back that nameplate back in 2000. Because you can have the Millennium Falcon. But no, seriously, we talk about the whole jokes with like the Bronco coming, and all that, and Jeep people are kind of concerned. Two things I want to, a handful of things.
Why are they concerned? I don't get it.
Well, people are like not really concerned. Some people are excited. It's a polarizing subject. Again, we
Yeah,
talked about it
we talked
before.
about it on the show.
We think it's great, but the cool thing is like is it going to be like so the Jeep Wave is it going to be the Bronco Kick?
Sorry, Denver.
Real Broncos have leaf springs. You know what I mean? Real Broncos have V8s, not a 6-cylinder turbo. I can just see all the pages now and all the forums. But again, this isn't the first time Jeep's been challenged. Can you remember the vehicle that came out in 2005, 2006, I think it was, that challenged Jeep? A major automotive manufacturer went after Jeep right about the same time the 4-door was released.
Not off the top of my head.
It's got the flapping penguin, I call it. Toyota. Little flapping penguin, I call it.
No.
Oh, the FJ Cruiser.
Oh.
They released the FJ Cruiser right just before the 4-door came out. Now, the FJ Cruiser's got a serious following. You know what I
it
mean?
does. And
it
we
is-
almost bought one for my daughter because it is a Toyota, so reliability, and it is a big box, and
Big box, and they went after the 4-wheel drive market, and it sold about 25,000 units a year.
Yep.
Except for 2008, when the downturn happened. But it never really was the Jeep killer they were hoping it would be.
And that's my thing is that even when the first 4Runners came out and the first pickups, and I had one of the little Toyotas for a while there.
Yeah.
And it's a great vehicle, but it wasn't a Jeep. Because, and that's the thing, I kind of look at people who get worried. I'm like, there is a legacy to the 7-slot grill.
Yes.
There is a legacy to that nameplate. There is a legacy. Now, there are times I wonder if Chrysler isn't pushing the legacy more than the vehicle because, eventually you can destroy a legacy.
Yes. Well, one of the things they talk
Excuse
about,
me,
and
folks.
the things that they released for the salesmen, everyone see them online. Talk about the Jeep's the folding forward windshield.
But when was the last time you saw a windshield down?
Exactly.
Now, I have seen them at several of our off-road events where people have done that. The last one was Jeeping with Judd, and I did see quite a few folks that were like, my windshield falls down, dang it, I'm going to fold it down until the first round of dusty trails. And then suddenly they were back up again.
Those bats in the belfry are crunchy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but no, it's kind of a. I guess I'm not worried. I welcome it because competition drives innovation, and we covered all this in the last show.
You might get that 2-door Gladiator.
You could. The key is if you want it, you got to buy it, because if you don't buy it, they ain't gonna make it.
Right.
You know, if you don't express the interest.
Yeah.
And you know, nobody at any Chrysler, Ford, Chevy, General Motors, whoever you want, Toyota,
Yeah.
Nissan, could have expected the Jeep to explode, you know. And let's be honest, it's not the fastest. It's not the prettiest. It's really not even the most trail capable. And I know that's hearsay to some people, but if you've ever watched a U-Mog from Mercedes, you know,
Yeah, well, and it's what's funny. People, well, that's a purpose-built military vehicle.
not really.
So was the Jeep in a way.
So was the Jeep.
Yeah.
But, you know, none of them have the history. None of them can you can look back. I can look at my TJ, which is almost an antique now. That's a horrible thought. Generationally, it is
Yeah.
removed, but not quite past the 20 years. But it will be soon.
5 years, we mean you get that blue plate.
Yeah, we could. But you know, I can still see D-Day in my TJ.
Yeah.
You can still see D-Day in your Gladiator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ford made a really good volley, because
Yeah.
I can see the U100, but the U100 itself, the original Bronco, that was the model number, was U100 for those that don't know the history. It was chasing a Jeep.
Yeah.
That's why Ford brought it out, was that they wanted the Jeep, because they manufactured a vast number of the quote unquote Willys, you
Right.
know. And
not everyone's Parnelli Jones.
correct. Yeah. For those that don't know, that was Big Ollie, which was a U100 that ran the Baja and just beat up
You know what?
bejeevers out of everybody else.
Thank you for making me not have to bleep half of stuff the show.
We're back into my history of the
Yeah.
stuff I followed as a kid and a young adult. I loved that stuff. But my first Jeep didn't come along until one of my jobs was doing work in Washington, D.C. with the Corps of Engineers, was a young engineer, and I had a job doing this neat little project, standing in the Potomac River up to my freezing, because unfortunately an aircraft a few years prior had attempted to take off, not survived, plunked into the Potomac River after playing ping pong off of the 14th Street Bridge, and everybody knows it as Air Florida. The Air Florida crash, and I was part of the team that went in and changed the runway overruns. What's that got to do with Jeeps, you may ask? Well, they didn't have any vehicles to give me except a very old, dilapidated CJ5
Get out, Betsy, and dust her off.
10 top. You know, some of the old Jeepers will know what I say, a 10 top. Yeah.
Snapple cap.
And it was painted black with a white, 10 top, and it was an old, what they called Civil Works Jeep, back when the Corps used to, well, they still do a lot of Civil Works, but we had a separate cadre that did that. And they're like, well, the shop won't work on it anymore, but if you need a vehicle, if you can get it running, you can use it. So that was my first CJ5. I'd only wanted one for a decade prior.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, gee.
And you got your Wrangler edition. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
The denim seats. Oh, wait, that was the jacket you were
No,
wearing.
this was yeah. This was a.
I know.
I'm not even sure they were anything other than canvas covered seats.
Yeah.
Yes, the gas tank was under my butt. You flipped your driver's seat forward to fill the.
Get out the Cosmoline soaked top.
Oh, it was it. But I will tell you what. I took those doors when that was back when the Corps of Engineers logo was a meatball. We called it. It was a round logo, and the doors had the big meatballs on them. And I would be driving from the north part of Washington, D.C., Del Carlia Reservoir, which is way up there at the northern point of the actual District of Columbia, down to the airport and back and forth. And it was through Georgetown. And I'd take the doors off in the summer, and I'd be wheeling myself with one foot outside the door. I was in heaven.
Or that bell bottle pants just a flopping.
No, that was after the bell-bottom pants
Okay.
quite a bit. They were.
This is the members only jacket days, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't even me then. That was blue jeans, work boots, and then the denim Corps of Engineers jacket that I had, because
I was making the joke about the denim jacket.
the heater didn't work. There
Duh.
was no air conditioning other
there
than
was,
two
240.
doors. And But here I am driving through the middle of Washington D.C. with the Porsches and the Corvettes, and the ladies standing on the corners and all that kind of stuff in that part of Washington D.C. It's like, and I'm driving there, and this big old and the top. If the piece of foam popped out between the roll bar and the top, every time you hit a bump, it.
Yeah, the Snapple cat.
So that was my intro to Jeeps, and that was it. I was hooked. It was everything that 16-year-old had dreamed of and wanted. Yeah, it was dirty. Yeah, it leaked. Yeah, it marked its spot more than the Harley that my coworker drove to work every day. He used to laugh. He
Hey,
says,
that's my spot. Well, wait, hold on. It's in the wrong spot. in the driveway.
that's the big puddle. That's mine.
Yeah.
I didn't get to take it home at night, but that cemented it. And
Well,
then
what's the old joke? You check the fluid. Yep, pedal of each.
puddle. Hey, you fix your Jeep. It hadn't got a puddle. Oh crap! I got to go get oil.
Yeah, it needs oil. Hey, you can tell when the Jeep needs oil for 3 reasons. 1, it's ticking. 2, and
It doesn't leave.
it doesn't leave a mark. And 3, you haven't checked that in a couple days.
Yeah. So, but how about you? Where did you get your first Jeep fix?
Pretty much when I was playing with GI Joes. And speaking of GI Joes, were you okay if I give a quick shout out to a YouTuber?
Sure.
Again, he reviews old GI Joe toys. HCC 788. He does reviews old toys from my childhood. And you talking about your going back, and it reminds me of playing with Jeeps, and then that's where I got my Jeep fix. That whole thing, and I thought it'd be a really cool idea to Again, I always wanted one, and it wasn't until I got my. Again, I always wanted one. I always wanted a Wrangler, and similar to you, when your dad brought home the tractor, my stepdad goes, "Hey, I brought you a Jeep." Really? Yeah, cool. Let me come see it. And it was the Gladiator, or at the time the not the Gladiator, but the Comanche. I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? Had I known then what I know now, I would have kept the stupid thing.
Well, but when Sue and I first got married, we needed another car. The first thing I did is I went down to the AMC dealer.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was already Chrysler AMC.
AMC Plymouth.
Yeah, and we went, and it was outside Philadelphia, right on the city lines, and they didn't have a Wrangler. And so the guy was taking me over, showing me the Cherokees. And in my budget, he was trying to put me in a 4-cylinder manual Cherokee, which was fine. And I mean, I was seriously considering it, and we took it for a test drive. And I said, well, I need to pull in the parking lot and do one test. And the guy's like, what's that? I said, nothing that's going to hurt it. He's like, well, okay. And I turned the AC on high.
The wipers on.
You turn the headlights on, and from a dead stop, turn the wheel to a hard lock, turn to one side. That little 4-cylinder just could not handle the auxiliary loads, much less try and move the Jeep.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I kind of had to say, well, until I can get what I want.
Yeah.
So, but then we actually, wasn't long after that when we were in Washington, D.C., that my wife needed a new vehicle, and we ended up getting her a Grand Cherokee. And it was the 94, first year out. And for those of you who do wheel the ZJs, you know that underneath it is a TJ.
Yeah.
Same front axle, same front suspension. It's got rear leaves, same transmission, same 4-liter engine, but it's just got plush upholstery on the inside and a rear bench seat that you can actually get in and out of. So,
as you put it from our first show, sawing the kids' legs off.
well, expediency. But
Sorry, Timmy, I only want to buy a TJ. That's a real Jeep.
yeah. So, and it lasted us all the way till we got here in Florida, and there was only a short time between that and the TJ. So, I come by it kind of honestly, and it's been tempered with experience from a whole raft, and I'm not going to list the plethora of other vehicles that I have wrenched on and overhauled engines or rebuilt engines or replaced or repowered or fix this, fix that. I will make one shout out comment, and that is that all I have to do, and if you guys want to watch a really neat video, a series, Eric O. Up in
that's why I made the judo chop reference.
Judo chop reference. Eric O. runs South Main Automotive up in New York. And he does publish a YouTube channel, and he is really one of the best at showing you how to do the deductive reasoning, particularly on electrical.
He's a character, too.
He is a character. But I watch his videos, and I go, you know what? It's hot. It's wet down here in Florida. It can get miserably hot. But I'm not working on rust cake.
Salted vehicle.
All salted. You watch him, and he'll sit there and he'll use, Big Nasty, which is an air hammer,
Right.
to push out, a shock bolt, and it just rains rust, around him. And I go, I remember that. I worked on New York vehicles, Pennsylvania vehicles, Northern Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, West Virginia.
And the Rust Belt.
I can remember trying to drive a bolt out and looking back and realize the bolt, the bracket, everything came off in one big piece.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, cue how Kevin learned to weld.
See previous statement about the duster he had.
Yeah. So, but, and then going into college and engineering and starting off in mechanical. I really thought that was where I belong because I really love things mechanical, the electrical, the systems, how they operate, how they interplay with each other. It wasn't until 4 years in that I went, this is neat, but this really isn't what I want to do for a living.
Yeah.
And that's when I went back for 2 more years, changing my major, dropping basically my last 2 years of mechanical engineering. Fortunately, made enough to qualify on paper, at least for a minor in mechanical, but
Right.
And got myself a degree in civil because while working on Jeeps and other vehicles is fun, it just really wasn't big scale enough for me.
Yeah.
And for those that, I'm not going to go into my job history, but every career for me, it was one progression after another of bigger programs, bigger projects, leading up to helping to rebuild a country.
Yeah.
And
then that's the thing where we talk about, what led us to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that, my hopes and dreams and aspirations of fixing things, led me to, get a roll up my sleeves. And, sometimes I had to fix things because I had to do it. And I thought, well, here's a way I can do it. I can give back a little to the community. And that's when we started the podcast, and Kevin loves to teach. Every time we do one of these off-road classes,
I just realized that the first time I was teaching, it was what's called the Free U course or Free University course at my college, my branch campus of my college. And I was realizing it was 40 years plus ago that I was teaching,
that was me ago.
Yeah, that was Scott ago. People how to change a tire, adjust brakes, change oils, change air filters. You do not need to put that oil filter on, sir, with the wrench.
It was funny. We're sitting there one day at work, and someone got out their big blue hammer or whatever, and you hear and I go, man, that guy's trying to get that drain plug really tight. And my neighbor next to me goes, no, man, he's getting the oil filter on really tight. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm only joking. No, but again, it's.
I wish you were.
Yeah, moving on. What we're going to say now, words. But hey, speaking of saying words and about the fact you like to teach and all that, I think it's would be a slick idea if we take a quick break.
Sure.
Because we're going to come right back to a really cool garage segment. Because I read something on the internet which led to another conversation. I'm like, hold that thought, Kevin. We got to talk about it in the show. So we'll be right back. Hey guys, don't forget to check out the On the Trail podcast page, onthetrailpodcast.com. You can see Kevin and I, again, have a face for radio. And not to mention the 4x4 Radio Network.com. And again, for all the really cool shows. And again, as always, our Patreon page. Become a Patreon, come on down. We'd really appreciate it, and then help out the show, and we can grow and grow and grow and grow and get bigger.
And the neat thing on our Patreon page, you can see that we do have some corporate Patreons.
Yep.
And you know what? If you're interested in work, basically when they become our Patreons, we usually check them out a little bit. So most of them will.
Yeah.
We think they do a pretty dang good job. In fact, most of them have been on the show. So if you want to find out how folks, are, you can, check out Jeep Lab. You can check out Red Scorpion Fab Works. You can check out Wrangler Fix. You can check out all kinds of the different.
Even the clubs.
Even the clubs. We've usually done an interview with them. Just like we did with Ox Locker. Rock the Ox.
There you
go. Anyhow.
Well, we're going to get right back to this show. And again, thank you for 100 episodes and all you patrons. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, Kevin, as it always talks about on the interwebs, quick question, because I kind of know the answer.
Only because we talked about it before we started recording.
I'm not supposed to know how it works behind the scenes. So, anyways,
you're the one who always says, "Let's do a pull back the curtain show."
Yeah, well, expose, if you will. Wait a minute. Anyways, so basically, from my old school days, I knew WD-40 was water displacement series 40 or Tri 40 or whatever you want to talk
Formula
about.
40. Yeah.
Formula 40. And I've seen tricks where people spray. The engine gets wet. Go through a water fording. You go ahead and hit the microphone with your hand. Spray the cap. With some WD-40, put the cap back on.
Now, and I've actually seen that trick go wrong.
And that's when Kevin says, wait at least 11 Mississippis. I'm like, oh, yeah, he's got a point there.
Try that out because it is a flammable propellant, and I have seen at least one personal experience with one person doing that and going, oh, snap, shouldn't you?
Bang.
Bam! And the rotor and cap are put in low Earth orbit.
Don't have one of those in your trail bag, do you? Hey,
yeah. It's kind of hard to put phenolic back together. It doesn't glue well.
It's like the whole keeping stuff in your trail bag. Well, my friend's got a spare towel. I'll use his. You ain't using my spare tire, pal.
Yeah.
But anywho, so anyways, water displacement WD-40. Again, it's not made official, guys. Sorry to break it. The internet's wrong. Go figure. But waterproofing ideas. Someone said you can use it on electrical connectors, and I'm like, no. Why can't I tag Kevin in this Facebook page? And you said it's a question that gets asked frequently, and you wanted to re-up the information. So WD-40, can you use it as electrical insulator?
It's not an insulator; it's an oil. Okay, and it's really an oil designed to displace water. And yes, if you have wet electrical systems that are shorted out, you can attempt to spray them down, and hopefully it will displace enough water. Most of the places I've seen it used is on electrical, spark plug wires and around the coil packs. In the old days, it was the coil.
Yeah.
Still, if you do anything and look at it, they do recommend that you spray it, dry it, wipe it off, and let it flash off before you try and use it again. The downside to any petroleum product is it may have adverse effects to plastics and rubbers, such as used in insulations or connectors. You may find that while it worked, it may kind of solidify the crud in the connection that you can't get it off next time. So I would say yes. When I have to use it for what it was originally designed for, WD-40 as a displacer, I will take apart a wet connection, spray with the water, to remove it, and then shake it or dry it off. I'd love it if I had compressed air, in which case I wouldn't even need the WD-40.
Right.
And then reconnect. But it's got a lot of uses. I mean, it is a petroleum product with a lubricant in it, so I've seen people use it very successfully as a safer method for starting diesels than ether. Because ether is a solvent. And while it's very flammable and will fire off a diesel with nary a rotation of the crankshaft, it also washes the oil off of the cylinder walls.
Yeah.
And really exacerbates wear. And WD-40 is not quite as explosive as that. Now, the older formulas may have worked better that used propane as a propellant, because then you're just doing propane injection.
Make it faster.
But, there's a lot of different tricks for different let's call it garage chemicals.
So keeping water out of electrical connectors, your standby still maintains the good old-fashioned just butter lard, right?
No. What he's referring to, folks, is I told him I wanted to revisit a topic that was in one of our very earliest shows. and it keeps coming back. It's kind of like that bad dream that you just can't shake.
It's kind of that bad electrical connection that keeps happening.
Yeah, and that is the argument over dielectric grease.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, what lifts do I run on my 35s? It
Yeah.
keeps coming back.
Folks, dielectric grease is a great product. But the fact is, I see people, I put it inside my electrical connectors. And I can't tell you that that's 100% wrong, but what I'm going to try and do is explain to you so that you can judge, is this the right time to use it or not? And then I'll give you some safer guidelines. Number one, it is dielectric. And people are like, well, it still conducts electricity. No, it doesn't. All right. If you go, and I'm sitting here with one of the more well-known brands, Permatex's data sheet, and it says breakdown voltage of grease per a specification. It's 1,100 volts per mil of thickness.
Okay.
That is not conductive. And let me make the point very clear. If you are one of those folks who takes a 6-pin connector, or let's say you're ECM and you flood coat the area and you shove that connector in there, if it was conductive, you'd short out all those pins.
Right.
All right, it's not conductive. Now, there are greases that we know of that are called conductive greases. They're not really, but they call them that. And you know one of them very well, and it comes in 2 varieties, silver and copper.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like strawberry and lanolin.
Nope.
Sorry, kiwi.
And that would be anti-seize.
Yeah.
Now, the truth is there's enough grease that the little particles of aluminum in the silver and little particles of copper in the copper-colored ones can't really conduct either. But the metal's in there for a different reason. The key is what makes dielectric grease special is the fact that it's 100% silicon-based grease. There is no... Sorry, folks. It is. We've had so much rain here. Everything is growing and repollinating and budding, and I have some... I'm sorry.
The pollen aspect.
I'm a North Carolina boy who's now in Florida, and I was not used to these here plants.
The pollen outlook on the news says apocalyptic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wait, apocalyptic.
Oh, good Lord. And so what it's good for is the silicon formulations are not injurious. They won't chew up plastics or rubbers for the most case. So O-rings, snap connectors, electrical wiring insulation, spark plug boots, it's safe to use on them.
Right.
It can be used on the connectors because its viscosity is such that when you push the connectors together for metal-to-metal contact, it basically will move out of the way for the most part.
Yeah.
The downside, and here's the catch that gets a lot of people in trouble. A lot of the newer connectors, I'll go with one brand that I'm very familiar with, WeatherPack.
Right.
Okay. And, well, I can't even think of the other names right now. But a lot of those are very, very small pins, tight tolerances, and they rely on the spring tension of copper, which is, you can bend copper pretty easily.
Yeah.
So they're made to be dry contact pins, between the center pin and the sleeve part. And when you pack it full of grease, like what I've seen people do, just,
like I used to do.
Yeah, more is better. And then you push that connector together, you actually put more grease in there than there's room for. And what does that do? That takes the sleeve portion and spreads it.
Right.
Now, you may have contact for a while, and you may not. It may be completely isolated and insulated, or it may, in other words, you can do physical damage by hydraulic pressure.
Yeah, you're almost hydrolocking your connector.
You are. And that's why, I have always recommended that clean the connector with contact cleaner that removes corrosion, and then keep the silicon, the dielectric grease on the sealing surfaces, okay, not on the electrical contacts, and that way they slide together. The seal, think about when we put gaskets, we want them to slip when we're tightening them to equalize pressure. That's why we do, when you do a head, you don't do in a circle and bunch up the gasket. You start in the middle and work way out. So having that lubrication on the sealing surface, and if you need to look inside a connector on a Chrysler, it's always almost always on the one that has the little lock and the pop tab.
Yeah.
And you look up in there and you'll see the center heart, which has got all the pins in it, and you'll see a different colored rubber gasket or vinyl gasket around that, and then the outer shell that physically protects it. That's a great place for dielectric grease.
That's what you taught me is around the gasket, basically.
And that will allow the gasket to move and seat as you lock the thing down, and then it provides outstanding moisture protection. You know, if you're missing the little rubber seals on the butt sides of the connector, by all means, you know, dielectric grease kind of from the backside to keep water out. It's a wonderful idea. It moves. It'll absorb the wire vibration without a problem.
Right.
Having said that, I can't tell you that putting it on the contacts is bad. Inherently, it's not. And the older contacts that were loose fit and oftentimes had a spring to help make the contact, stay tight, the stuff would squish out and it would surround the pins and the tubes and the clips and the slides.
It almost make it like a hermetically sealed.
And it made it a hermetically sealed joint. The classic one where dielectric grease was, and it probably got the idea that everybody should put it everywhere, is the old spade and sleeve connectors. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, light bulbs too is what they told us to do.
Yeah. Well, light bulbs used to go in with a turn and a twist.
Right.
And that would squeegee the material off.
Okay.
Now, there's one place I will be blunt about. Yeah, can use it on the boot, and should, of a plug and coil, but don't put it up on the high voltage connections. The reason being, when exposed to high voltages and arcs, like in a spark for an ignition system, particularly when now what are we up to, 60, 80,000 volts of electricity, silicon carburizes. And quite frankly, when you have an excess of silicon and it carburizes under an electric arc, you get something called silicon carbide.
Yeah.
That same abrasive that's used for, shot blasting, your sanding belts.
Yeah. Compression shorts.
Oh, ow.
That's the Chafe brand.
Okay. And, you can actually,
Every time I go jogging, I smell fire.
I mean, I didn't realize that till I looked up from another friend of mine, and this is probably 15 years in the past.
Yeah.
He had actually coated a rotor and figured that the rotor spinning inside a distributor cap would benefit from this since it was conductive, right? Well, no. And if you've ever seen one of the advertisements with a clear rotor cap and seeing a rotor spinning inside there as an engine is running, what you see is literally Johnny Cash song, A Ring of Fire. Mm-hmm. The arc is so continuous, even though you can't see it, it does only go to one post at a time, but there's a trailing voltage behind it. And so it's a firestorm in there. That's why it's a closed-in, solid, insulated cap. And I guess it created enough silicon carbide. We couldn't figure out what had happened because it eroded the entire tip off and it core-holed the little spring center cap.
Wow.
From the grinding. And that was because, and I found it in a report online that was what has happened with the silicon. It's a great product. Please, this is not in the least bit negative on it. It's just use it the way the manufacturers intended you to use it, and you'll have some fantastic results. I keep the stuff around constantly. It's a great lubricant, not just for electrical connectors. Just because it says dielectric, that just is good news for you. You got squeaky plastic parts that rub together.
Yep.
It's a great lubricant for squeaky plastic parts. It's overall a very benign lubricant. It's typically clear to just slightly opaque, so it doesn't really leave the little lithium grease was good, but that leaves little white fingerprints everywhere.
It almost reminds me of Zipper Lube.
Guess what?
It's probably the same stuff.
It's the same stuff. Charges you more in a smaller tube.
Way to go.
A lot of zipper lubes are basically thickened Vaseline, which is a petroleum. So you run a risk there of staining and that kind of stuff. But it's a great lube. And again, for those of you that are using it successfully inside battery terminals between the post and the clamp, more power to you. I don't recommend it. Coating the outside of a connection after it's been made, I'm all for it. That's a great way to seal the connector. You know, liberal, most part, judicious use is probably better than liberal. But, you know, let's be honest, most things that way. If a little's good, a lot's usually not better.
Yeah.
So that's just an old one. We did cover that on a show quite some time ago. But, you know, since it keeps coming up, we thought that just might be a really good, reminder for folks that use the stuff for what it was intended.
Well, that's another thing, too. I'd like to, on our next show, 101, besides the Dalmatians, I would like to bring up the TSB on the Gladiator.
Okay.
If you have any luck with the TSB, apparently there's a TSB that just got released. The wife kind of found it a little bit. I kind of knew a little bit about it, where the Gladiators have been, and JLs have been known to wander on the highway, kind of like what the old Jeep was doing.
Like your old JK was doing, which you have that steering gearbox with that overlong shaft that just kind of fatigued.
Yeah, and so I guess there's a TSB. So I'm gonna do some more research about that, because our Gladiator kind of gets a little wandery every now and then. So I'm like,
which surprises me with the long wheelbase. It should be very stable.
Yeah. Well, again, we're gonna check in and look into it a little bit. If you have any experience with that,
I'll take a look.
Yeah. Well, let's say if you do personally, email the show on the Trail Podcast at gmail.com.
Listeners, I see you.
Yeah. Sorry.
He's staring at me when he says that and pointing his finger at me. And you know what? The Patreons that see us on video will confirm that he was doing that.
Yeah, the Patreons right now are going, whoa, man, it's OTT After Dark. It was a dark and stormy night. We were in the garage.
We're in my studio, but
Yeah,
that's
I know
fine.
that
The garage is right over there.
Exactly.
It really is there, guys.
It's literally on the other side
behind
of the
you
wall.
on the other side of where you're.
Yeah, past the ladder holding the shop light to the... I'm so bad. I'm sorry, guys.
That's fine.
I
Break
remember the
fourth wall.
microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, now I'm going to have to, when we end the shows, I'm going to have to turn the camera on before I turn it off, just so they get a face glare of what we're trying to work with here.
I'd take a picture, but it'd just be a giant white dot. But
Anywho, I really think we've probably taken the 100th show places that it never intended, just like our Jeeps.
Exactly. But again, we enjoy to do this, and we're going to keep doing this. As the one reviewer left, please keep putting out great content. We have every intention to.
And I'm going to ask each and every one of the listeners, Patreon and otherwise, give us some content.
Contracts and
Some content. I realized I was about ready to eat the microphone cover. I'm sorry. I figured that would be a little gross. That's Scott's fingers.
It's like a giant marshmallow.
Except it's a little over toasted.
That's the Stop Drop Roll brand.
Yes, they're charcoal colored.
Exactly.
That's what your marshmallow looked like the last time we were out camping.
After I dropped it. Moving on. So I think it's enough time to talk.
I think time to lock up, put the Jeeps in 4-low, and hit the trail.
And as always, don't forget to take pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail.
Keep it happy and clean for the next generation, because if we keep screwing it up, they're going to take it away.
That's another show.
Yeah, it is. There's been a round of that here in Florida, but that's a topic for another show, as Scott said.
And Kevin's kind of like, I brought that subject I wanted Scott to go off on, but at the end, so I'm not going to go on it now.
Thank you.
That's the next one. So with that, we're signing off. Have a wonderful time.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yep.
Wear your mask, I guess, is the proper etiquette. Although, I like, right now we've got a distance between us, and we don't have masks, we have microphones. So cough into your sleeve, all the other fun stuff. You can look at the CDC. They give you they seem to have finally got their head wrapped around this and are giving reasonable.
Remember, kids, use your sneezing elbow.
Yes.
All righty. Well, with that, it's time to wheel legal, tread lightly, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye now.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.